The sky above New York City did not just turn dark. It shattered like a glass ceiling hit by a hammer. There was no warning siren. There was no countdown. One moment the sun was shining on the metal spire of the Empire State Building, and the next moment the blue sky cracked open. A jagged tear appeared in the fabric of reality itself. It was not a portal made by a machine. It was a wound. A beam of blue energy erupted from the tear. It was wider than a city block. It moved faster than light. It slammed into the atmosphere of the Earth with the force of a falling planet. The sound did not come until later, because the energy moved too fast for sound to keep up. The air pressure in Manhattan dropped instantly. Windows on 1,000 buildings exploded outward at the same time. Cars on the streets were flipped over by the sudden wind. People fell to their knees. It was not just the wind. It was the feeling of the energy. It was heavy. It felt like anger. It felt like panic. It pressed down on the minds of 8 million people at once. In the Sanctum Sanctorum, Dr. Strange fell to the floor. The magical barriers protecting his home dissolved. He did not feel a spell. He felt a spirit so powerful and so desperate that it drowned out the mystical energies of the world. He looked up at his skylight and saw the blue fire descending. He knew this was not an attack. It was an accident. It was a spillover from a war in a place that should not exist. High above the city, Tony Stark was flying in his Iron Man suit. His systems went offline. The arc reactor in his chest flickered. The energy pouring from the sky was interfering with electricity. His suit fell like a stone for 20 stories before the emergency power kicked in. He looked up and saw the beam hit Central Park. It did not explode like a bomb. It drilled. The ground liquefied. The trees turned to ash instantly. The water in the reservoir flashed into steam that covered the whole island in a hot white fog. The ground shook with a rhythmic pounding. It felt like a heartbeat. On the moon, Uatu the Watcher stood in silence. He was sworn to only watch and never interfere. He had seen universes die and stars explode. But he stared at the Earth with wide eyes. He saw the timeline bending. A variable had entered the equation that did not belong. This energy was called Ki in the other world. It was life force controlled by will. In the Marvel Universe, life force was soft and subtle. In the world, this beam came from life. Force was a weapon that could break solar systems. The Watcher saw the source of the beam. It was a boy. He was pushing back against a monster made of green cells. The boy had pushed too hard. He had pushed so hard to save his friends that he pushed himself out of his own story. The beam faded. The tear in the sky slowly began to close, but the damage was done. The clouds were gone. The ozone layer was burned away in a perfect circle. Central Park was a smoking ruin. The silence that followed was worse than the noise. In the bottom of a crater of melted rock lay the traveler. He was a child with spiky hair that flickered between gold and black. His clothes were purple and torn to rags. He was unconscious. One arm was limp and broken. The other hand was still clenched in a fist. He was small and he looked human, but the energy coming off his sleeping body distorted the air. Small rocks floated up around him. The Avengers landed at the rim of the crater. Captain America, Thor, and Iron Man looked down. They saw a boy who looked like a victim. They did not know that his heartbeat was currently syncing with the seismic fault lines of the North American continent. They did not know that if he woke up screaming, he could crack the earth in half. They only knew that the world had changed in a single second. The heat radiating from the crater was not fire. It was a physical weight that pressed against the chest plates of the Iron Man armor. Tony Stark hovered 10 feet above the scorched earth of Central Park and watched his senses fail one by one. The heads-up display flickered with red warning lights that he had never programmed. The energy output from the boy in the center of the hole was not radioactive, and it was not electromagnetic. It was something else entirely. It was a biological broadcast of raw power that defied the laws of physics as Stark understood them. He ordered Jarvis to run a full spectrum analysis, but the AI simply returned error codes. The air smelled of ozone and something copper-like, the smell of a storm that had been compressed into a bottle. Thor landed heavily next to the rim of the crater. The Asgardian god did not look at Stark. He looked only at the unconscious child. Thor gripped the handle of Mjolnir tightly. He had fought frost giants and dark elves and cosmic horrors, but the presence coming off this small broken body made the hair on his arm stand up. It was a feeling of absolute predation. It was the feeling of a creature that stood at the top of a food chain that Earth did not even know existed. Captain America joined them a moment later. His shield was raised. He looked at the destruction around them. The trees were gone. The soil had been turned into glass. This was a zone of total annihilation, centered on a boy who could not be older than 11. Cap lowered his shield slowly. He saw the injuries on the boy. The purple GI was shredded. There was dried blood on his forehead, and his left arm was twisted at a sickening angle. He did not look like a monster. He looked like a victim of a war zone. Cap signaled for the paramedics to hang back. He did not want civilians getting close to whatever radiation this was. He stepped down into the glass pit. The heat increased. It felt like walking into a blast furnace. Cap knelt beside the boy. He reached out to check a pulse. As soon as his gloved fingers touched the boy's neck, a shockwave of static electricity snapped against his skin. It was not a defense mechanism. It was just the boy's natural energy leaking out. The pulse was slow and heavy. It beat like a hammer against Cap's fingertips. Thump, thump, thump. It was the heartbeat of something that was dying but refusing to let go. Stark landed next to him. The faceplate of his armor retracted. He looked pale. He told Cap that they needed to move him immediately, but not to a hospital. A normal hospital could not handle this. If the kid woke up and released whatever energy had dug this hole, he would vaporize a city block. They needed the isolation unit at Stark Tower. It was built to hold Hulk. It was the only thing strong enough. Thor stepped forward and offered to carry him. He slid his arms under the boy. Thor frowned. The boy was small, but he was incredibly heavy. His bone density was off the charts. It was like lifting a statue made of lead. Thor adjusted his grip and nodded to the others. They launched into the sky. They moved fast. They did not speak. The silence over New York was heavy. The city was in shock. Thousands of people watched from broken windows as the Avengers carried the fallen traveler toward the tower that defined the skyline. They did not know that the boy in Thor's arms had just saved a different Earth from a bio-android named Cell. They did not know he was the strongest being in his universe. They only saw a tragedy. Inside the medical bay of Stark Tower, the atmosphere was frantic. Bruce Banner was already there. He had been called in from the lab. He was scrubbing his hands and looking at the monitors that lined the wall of the isolation chamber. The boy lay on a bio-bed in the center of the room. He was surrounded by a containment field of hard light energy. Several robotic arms were scanning his body. Banner looked at the readings and shook his head. He told Stark that the biology made no sense. The subject appeared human on the surface, but on a cellular level he was completely alien. The cells were not just biological batteries. They were reactors. Every single cell in the boy's body was generating a microscopic amount of plasma energy. Banner had never seen efficiency like this. Even the Hulk did not process energy this efficiently. The Hulk generated power through rage and gamma radiation. This boy generated power simply by existing. His resting metabolic rate was enough to power the entire eastern seaboard. And he was injured. His body was currently prioritizing repair. The energy was being directed inward to knit bones and seal ruptured blood vessels. The healing factor was visible to the naked eye. The bruises were fading as they watched. Doctor Strange materialized in the room without opening a door. He floated a few inches off the floor. His cloak of levitation twitched nervously. Stark turned around and asked the Sorcerer Supreme what he was doing there. Strange did not answer. He stared at the boy through the glass of the containment unit. He raised his hands and cast a spell of revelation. A mandala of orange light appeared in front of him. He rotated the rings of the spell, trying to read the boy's aura. The mandala cracked and shattered. Strange stepped back. He looked disturbed. He explained that he had felt the breach in the sanctum. He thought it was a dimensional lord trying to enter their reality. But this was not magic. The boy had no connection to the mystic arts. He had no connection to the Vishanti or the dark dimension. He was a closed loop. His soul was burned bright with a kind of spiritual pressure that acted like gravity. Strange warned them that the boy's spirit was traumatized. It was fractured. He sensed deep grief and an overwhelming rage that was currently locked behind a door of exhaustion. If that door opened, the psychic backlash alone could knock out everyone in the building. Stark turned back to the monitors. He was trying to synthesize a sedative. He needed to keep the kid under until they figured out the threat level. He injected a dosage of tranquilizer meant for a large elephant into the IV line. The boy's metabolism consumed it in 3 seconds. The heart rate did not even slow down. Stark cursed. He told Jarvis to mix a cocktail based on the Hulkbuster formula. It was a chemical compound designed to suppress adrenaline. The robotic arm administered the second dose. This time the boy's brow furrowed. He let out a low groan. The monitor spiked. The energy output jumped by 200% in a microsecond. The containment field hummed loudly as it struggled to contain the sudden flare of heat. Banner took a step back. He felt the familiar itch of the other guy in the back of his brain. The Hulk was reacting to the presence of a challenger. Banner forced himself to breathe. He told Stark to stop. The drugs were not working. They were being interpreted by the boy's body as a poison or an attack. The immune system was fighting back with energy. Inside the boy's mind, there was only fire. Gohan was dreaming of the Red Desert. He was dreaming of the Cell games. He saw the android's head rolling on the ground. He heard the crunch of metal as Cell's foot came down. He felt the snap in his own brain, the white-hot line that crossed his vision. He heard his father's voice telling him to let it go, to let the anger out. But the anger was too much. It was a flood. He was drowning in it. In the dream, he fired the Kamehameha. He felt his arm break. He felt the energy leaving him. He was pushing against a mountain of green light. He was slipping. He was failing. He needed more power. He needed to push harder. If he didn't push harder, everyone would die. Trunks would die. Piccolo would die. His mother would die. The responsibility crushed him. He screamed in the dream. He screamed for his father. But his father was gone. His father had teleported away to save them, and he wasn't coming back. Gohan was alone. He was 11 years old, and he was the only thing standing between the earth and silence. He had to wake up. He had to finish it. Gohan's eyes snapped open. They were not black. For a split second, they were a piercing teal green. The pupil was gone. The containment unit exploded. It did not break. It was vaporized. The reinforced glass turned into dust instantly. The shockwave threw Tony Stark across the room and into the far wall. Bruce Banner was knocked over a console. Doctor Strange threw up a shield of eldritch energy just in time to deflect a piece of flying machinery. The alarms in the tower began to scream. Smoke filled the room. In the center of the ruin, Gohan stood up. He was panting. His chest heaved. He looked around wildly. His vision was blurry. He saw shapes. He saw figures in armor. He saw a man in a cape. He did not recognize them. He did not recognize the key signatures. These people were weak. They were incredibly weak compared to Cell. Their energy was like candle flames compared to the roaring bonfires he was used to. But he couldn't sense Cell. He couldn't sense his father. He couldn't sense Vegeta. The silence of the familiar energies was terrifying. Where was he? Gohan staggered forward. The floor cracked under his bare foot. He looked at his hands. They were shaking. He was still in the Super Saiyan state, but barely. The gold aura flickered around him like a dying light bulb. He tried to speak, but his throat was dry. He managed to croak out a single word. He asked where Cell was. The language was Japanese, but the universal translators in Stark's armor and the Avengers' comms picked it up. Stark pulled himself out of the debris. His armor was dented. He raised a hand repulsor. He told the kid to stand down. He told him he was safe and in custody. The word custody was a mistake. To a child soldier who had just been fighting for the survival of his species' custody, sounded like capture. Gohan's eyes narrowed. He shifted his stance. It was a subtle movement. He dropped his center of gravity. His knees bent slightly. To the untrained eye, it looked like he was slumping. To Captain America, who had just entered the room with his shield ready, it looked like the most perfect combat stance he had ever seen. Cap shouted for Stark to lower his weapon. He realized the boy was confused. He tried to step forward. He raised his hands to show he was empty-handed. He spoke calmly. He told Gohan that they were the Avengers. They were the good guys. They had found him in a crater. He was hurt. They were trying to help. Gohan looked at Cap. He looked at the star on his chest. He sensed no malice from this man. The man felt honest. But Gohan could not afford to trust. Not yet. He needed to find high ground. He needed to locate the threat. He bent his knees and vanished. To Stark, he simply disappeared. The sensors could not track the movement. To Gohan, he had simply jumped. He moved faster than the human eye could process. He reappeared on the balcony of the tower. The glass doors had shattered as he passed through them. The Avengers rushed to the balcony. They found Gohan standing on the railing. He was looking up at the sky. The wind whipped his torn clothes. He was staring at the stars. It was night now. The constellations were different. They were slightly wrong. The moon was there, but it was the wrong size. And there were no other high power levels on the planet. The strongest key he could feel was the green one inside the building. The man named Banner. But even that was dormant. Gohan felt a cold pit in his stomach. He was not on his Earth. The realization hit him harder than any punch from Cell. He was lost. He was completely alone. The golden light around him faded. His hair turned black and fell back down. His shoulders slumped. He looked like a small child again. Thor stepped onto the balcony. He kept his distance. He spoke with a booming but gentle voice. He told the boy that he had traveled far. He told him that he knew the look of a warrior who had lost his way. Thor offered him sanctuary. Gohan turned to look at them. Tears were forming in his eyes. He wiped them away angrily. Saiyans didn't cry. He was the son of Goku. He had to be strong. He asked them what planet this was. Stark answered. He said it was Earth. Gohan shook his head. He said it wasn't his Earth. He asked if they had a spaceship. He needed to go home. His mum was waiting. She would be worried. The crack in his voice when he mentioned his mother was heartbreaking. Suddenly, a proximity alarm blared from the tower's perimeter defense. Shield Quinjets were approaching. Nick Fury had arrived. He had tracked the energy spike. The jets hovered around the tower with searchlights trained on the balcony. Loudspeakers ordered the Avengers to surrender the entity for containment. Gohan looked at the ships. They looked like military craft. They looked like the ships the Red Ribbon Army used. His demeanor hardened instantly. The tears stopped. The ki flared back up. This time it was not a flicker. It was a roar. The white-blue aura exploded around him, blowing the searchlights out. The glass on the neighboring skyscrapers shattered from the pressure. Gohan floated up into the air. He did not need a ship. If these people were enemies, he would fight them. Stark yelled at the shield pilots to back off. He screamed over the comms that they were provoking a nuclear event. Fury ignored him. The Quinjets deployed containment cables made of vibranium alloy. They fired at Gohan. Gohan didn't even dodge. He caught the cables. He looked at them with confusion. They were slow. Everything here was so slow. He tugged on the cables. The Quinjets were yanked out of the sky. They crashed into each other. Gohan didn't want to hurt them. He just wanted them to stop annoying him. He calculated the trajectory perfectly so the pilots could eject. He watched the parachutes open. He was careful. Even in his panic, he was careful. Thor decided he had to intervene before the military escalated this to a full bombardment. He spun Mjolnir and launched himself at Gohan. He did not aim to strike. He aimed to grapple. He wanted to pin the boy down until he listened. Thor collided with Gohan in mid-air. It sounded like a thunderclap. The shockwave cleared the clouds for 3 miles. Thor expected the boy to fold. He expected to carry him down to the roof. Instead, Thor felt like he had hit a mountain range. Gohan had blocked Mjolnir with one hand. His small fingers were wrapped around the head of the hammer. He looked at Thor with intensity. The boy's feet were planted on nothing but air. He wasn't moving. Thor pushed with all his might. His muscles bulged. Lightning arced from the hammer. Gohan did not budge. The boy simply pushed back. He threw Thor. He didn't punch him, he just threw him. Thor flew backwards at Mach speed. He smashed through the Chrysler building, tearing a hole through the steel structure, and crashed into the East River. Iron Man and War Machine, who had just arrived, opened fire. Repulsor blasts and missiles streaked toward Gohan. Gohan swatted the missiles away. They exploded harmlessly in the air. He caught the repulsor beams on his palms. He didn't understand why they were attacking him. He just wanted to go home. He flew upwards, seeking higher altitude to think. Stark pursued him. He pushed his thrusters to max. He broke the sound barrier. He caught up to Gohan at 30,000 feet. Stark fired his unibeam. It was his strongest weapon. A focused beam of particle energy. It hit Gohan square in the chest. Smoke billowed. Stark paused, waiting for the reading. The smoke cleared. Gohan was hovering there. His clothes were more torn, but his skin was unbroken. He looked annoyed. He vanished again. Stark's sensors couldn't find him. Then there was a tap on Stark's shoulder. Stark turned around in midair. Gohan was floating right behind him. The boy chopped the back of Stark's neck. It was a light tap by Gohan standards, just enough to knock out a human. Stark's armor locked up. The systems went critical. The suit lost power and began to free fall. Gohan watched him fall. He realized he might have hit too hard. He dived. He caught the Iron Man suit before it hit the ground. He set Stark down gently on a rooftop. Gohan stood on the roof. He was breathing hard, not from exertion but from stress. The Avengers were regrouping below. More shield forces were coming. He could sense their intent. They were afraid. and fear made people dangerous. He needed to hide. He needed to suppress his power. He remembered his training with Piccolo and his father in the time chamber. Control, total control. He closed his eyes. He pulled the roaring fire of his ki deep inside. He locked it down. The aura vanished. The pressure in the air lifted. To the senses, he was now just a normal boy. He jumped into the alleyways. He moved through the shadows. He ran like a ninja, silent and invisible. He disappeared into the labyrinth of New York City. Back at the tower, Captain America regrouped with a wet and angry Thor. Doctor Strange was meditating, trying to track the boy's soul, but the signal had vanished. The boy had learned to mask his presence perfectly. Fury was on the screen, yelling about a threat to national security. Cap looked at the destruction. He looked at the hole in the skyline where the Chrysler building used to be whole. He realized that the rules of engagement had changed. They weren't dealing with a villain. They were dealing with a frightened child who had the power to juggle tanks. And now, that child was loose in a city of 8 million people, scared, alone, and convinced that the world was out to get him. Cap ordered a citywide search, but with strict orders. Do not engage. If you find him, call it in. If you shoot at him, you might just break the planet. Gohan sat on top of a water tower in Hell's Kitchen. He hugged his knees to his chest. He was cold. The adrenaline was wearing off and the pain from his broken arm was coming back. He missed his dad. He missed Dende. He looked at the strange city lights. They were yellow and harsh. He felt a tear roll down his cheek. He wiped it away. He would figure this out. He was Son Gohan. He would survive. He watched a police car drive by below, sirens wailing. He stayed perfectly still. He waited for the sun to rise on this strange, fragile world. He knew he had to be careful. If he slipped, if he lost control for even a second, he could hurt everyone. And he was done hurting people. He just wanted peace. But peace was a luxury the Marvel Universe rarely afforded anyone, especially someone with the power to rewrite the map. The first contact was over. The breach was real. And now the survival phase began. In the shadows of the alleyway beneath the water tower, a figure was watching. Daredevil tilted his head. He listened to the heartbeat on the roof. It was unlike anything he had ever heard. It was slow, powerful, and terrified. He heard the density of the muscle, the heavy bones. He smelled the ozone and the dried alien blood. Daredevil didn't know what was up there, but he knew it was suffering. He gripped his billy clubs and began to climb the fire escape. He moved silently, but to Gohan's ears, he sounded like a herd of elephants. Gohan didn't move. He let the man come. He was curious. This man felt different. He felt like a warrior, but a weak one. A human one. Maybe he could ask for directions. Maybe he could ask where the food was. Gohan's stomach growled. It was a loud, rumbling sound that echoed through the alley. Daredevil paused. The tension broke slightly. A monster didn't have a stomach growl like a hungry kid. The devil of Hell's Kitchen continued his climb, unaware that he was climbing toward a being who could blow out the sun. The night was far from over. The interaction on the rooftop in Hell's Kitchen was defined by the silence between the heartbeats. Daredevil stood on the rusted iron grating of the fire escape and tilted his head. To his radar sense, the boy was a blazing sun of sensory data. The density of the boy's muscle tissue was so high that it reflected sound waves like solid steel. The heat coming off him was enough to distort the air currents for 20 feet. But the most terrifying thing was the boy's breathing. It was shallow and ragged. It was the breathing of a soldier who was waiting for the next mortar shell to land. Matt Murdock lowered his billy club slowly. He raised his hands in a gesture of peace. He spoke softly. He did not ask the boy who he was. He asked if he was hungry. Gohan looked at the man in the red suit. He did not sense a threat. The man had no ki to speak of. He was just a human with slightly heightened senses. But the question cut through Gohan's defenses faster than any attack. He was starving. The transformation into Super Saiyan, 2 burned calories at a rate that defied thermodynamics. His body was currently cannibalizing its own fat reserves to keep his heart beating. His stomach gave a painful lurch. Gohan nodded. He did not lower his guard, but he uncrossed his arms. Matt heard the shift in the boy's posture. He heard the friction of the torn purple fabric. He gestured for the boy to follow him. They did not fly. Gohan understood that he needed to stay low. He followed the red man across the rooftops, jumping across alleyways with a lightness that made no sound. They ended up in a small all-night diner on 10th Avenue. It was empty, except for a tired waitress and a cook scraping grease off the grill. Matt sat in a booth and gestured for Gohan to sit opposite him. Gohan slid into the vinyl seat. He looked small. The booth swallowed him. He kept his broken arm tucked against his chest. Matt ordered for him. He ordered 4 cheeseburgers, a stack of pancakes, and 3 milkshakes. The waitress looked at the small kid and raised an eyebrow, but she wrote it down. When the food arrived, Gohan looked at it with intense focus. He picked up a burger. He ate it in 2 bites. He ate the next one. Then the pancakes. It wasn't enough. It wasn't even close. The Saiyan metabolism required 20,000 calories just to maintain a resting state after a battle of that magnitude. Gohan looked at the empty plates and then at Matt. He felt shame. He was a burden. He looked down at the table. Matt sensed the boy's distress. He ordered more. He kept ordering until the cook ran out of beef. Gohan ate with a mechanical efficiency. As the glucose hit his bloodstream, his brain began to clear. The panic of the arrival receded, and the cold reality of his situation set in. He asked Matt about the energy he had felt earlier. He asked about the man in the metal suit. Matt explained about the Avengers. He explained that they were protectors. Gohan frowned. He said they attacked him. Matt explained that they were afraid. He explained that power on this world was usually a result of an accident or a mutation, and it was almost always dangerous. Gohan looked at his hands. He said that where he came from, power was a result of training. It was a choice. Matt listened to the boy's heartbeat. It was steady when he said this. It was the truth. While Gohan ate, the world was reacting. In the Baxter building, Reed Richards was standing in front of a holographic display that spanned the entire laboratory. The Fantastic Four were gathered around him. Reed was not looking at biological data. He was looking at dimensional topology. The breach that had deposited the boy in Central Park was not a standard portal. It was a collision. Reed explained to Sue Storm that the boy's universe operated on different physical laws. In that universe, willpower could override physics. Energy could be created from nothing. Here, in the Marvel Universe, the laws of thermodynamics were absolute. Energy could not be created or destroyed, only changed. The boy was a living paradox. Every second he existed in this reality, he was violating the local laws of physics. The universe was trying to correct the error. Reed pointed to a graph. The background radiation in New York City was dropping. The boy was unconsciously absorbing ambient energy to sustain his biology. He was a heat sink. If he fought, if he flared that energy again, he might rupture the local space-time manifold. Reed said they had to contain him not to arrest him, but to stop him from accidentally unraveling the atomic bonds of the city. In the morning, Gohan needed a place to hide. Matt took him to an abandoned boxing gym in the basement of a condemned building. It smelled of old sweat and mildew. It was perfect. It was shielded from the street, and the thick concrete walls dampened the noise of the city. Matt gave him some old clothes, a grey hoodie, and oversized jeans to cover the shredded gi. He told Gohan to stay put. He had to go to work. He was a lawyer. Gohan found this funny. A warrior who was a lawyer. It reminded him of his mother. She always wanted him to be a scholar. The thought of Chi-Chi made his chest ache. He sat in the corner of the gym and tried to meditate. He tried to reach out with his kai to find his father's signal. He searched the stars. He found nothing. The universe was deafeningly silent. There was no Frieza, no Namek, no King Kai. There was just a chaotic mess of radio waves and the low hum of electricity. But silence is not safety. In a penthouse overlooking the city, Wilson Fisk, the kingpin of crime, was watching a video feed. It was grainy footage from a traffic camera near the diner. It showed the boy eating. Fisk paused the frame. He zoomed in on the boy's arm. He saw the bruising. He saw the eyes. Fisk had contacts in S.H.I.E.L.D. He knew about the crater in Central Park. He knew the Avengers had lost the target. Fisk did not see a threat. He saw an asset. He saw a weapon that could be molded. If the boy was lost and hungry, he could be bought. If he was scared, he could be manipulated. Fisk picked up his phone. He did not call his usual thugs. He needed specialists. He called the mercenaries who handled enhanced problems. He called the Taskmaster. Gohan's meditation was broken by the sound of a door being kicked in. He opened his eyes. 3 men stood at the entrance of the gym. They were not police. They wore tactical armor and carried weapons that hummed with energy. Taskmaster stood in the center. He wore a skull mask and carried a shield and sword. He studied Gohan. Taskmaster's ability was photographic reflexes. He could copy any move he saw. He had watched the footage of the Avengers fight. He knew the boy was fast. But Taskmaster relied on the logic that everyone had a style. Everyone had a pattern. Taskmaster stepped forward. He spoke with a professional calm. He told the boy that the Avengers were coming back to finish the job. He lied. He said he represented a group that helped people like him. People who were misunderstood. He offered Gohan a way out. Gohan stood up. He sensed the deception immediately. The key of these men was jagged and malicious. It felt like the energy of the androids, cold and purposeful. Gohan said no. He said he wanted to be left alone. Taskmaster sighed. He signaled the attack. The 2 mercenaries flanked Gohan. They fired containment nets made of electrified cable. Gohan didn't dodge. He simply let the nets hit him. The electricity arced over his skin. It tickled. He grabbed the cables and yanked. The mercenaries were pulled off their feet and slammed into each other. Taskmaster moved. He was fast. He closed the distance in a blur. He swung his sword at Gohan's neck. It was a lethal strike. Gohan caught the blade between his thumb and forefinger. The steel snapped. Taskmaster's eyes widened behind the mask. He dropped a flashbang grenade. The gym was filled with blinding white light and a deafening bang. To a normal human, this would be incapacitating. To Gohan, who had stared into the solar flare, it was nothing. He walked through the smoke. He didn't want to fight. He just wanted to leave. But Taskmaster was persistent. He switched to a bow and fired 3 explosive arrows. Gohan caught 2 and deflected the third. The third arrow hit a structural support column. The columns shattered. The ceiling above them groaned. The building was condemned for a reason. It was unstable. Dust began to fall. Gohan looked up. He realized the danger. Not to him, but to the building. Taskmaster saw the hesitation. He exploited it. He threw his shield. It ricocheted off the wall and hit Gohan in the back of the head. It didn't hurt Gohan, but it annoyed him. Gohan turned and unleashed a ki, a shockwave of invisible spirit energy. He meant to just push Taskmaster back. He miscalculated the durability of the world. The shockwave hit Taskmaster and sent him flying through the brick wall of the basement. But the air pressure didn't stop there. It expanded. The foundation of the building, already weakened by the explosion, gave way. With a sound like a dying beast, the 5-story tenement building above them collapsed. Gohan reacted instantly. He flared his aura. He tried to catch the ceiling. He flew up and braced his hands against the falling tons of concrete and steel. In the Dragon Ball universe, he could have caught the building. He could have lifted it and set it down gently. But here, physics was cruel. The concrete had no structural integrity to support being lifted from a single point. Gohan's hands punched right through the stone. He wasn't lifting the building. He was piercing it. The leverage failed. The building collapsed around him. The noise was deafening. Then there was silence. A cloud of dust rose into the street. Sirens began to wail in the distance. Gohan stood in the rubble. He was untouched. The debris had bounced off his ki shield, but he was standing in a graveyard. He looked around frantically. He used his senses. He felt faint heartbeats under the rubble. Squatters, homeless people who had been sleeping on the upper floors. He had knocked the building down on top of them. Gohan began to dig. He moved rocks that weighed 2 tons as if they were pillows. He found a man trapped under a beam. The man was bleeding. Gohan lifted the beam. The man looked at him with terror. He didn't see a hero. He saw a monster covered in dust with glowing eyes who had just destroyed his shelter. The man screamed. Gohan flinched. He backed away. He found another person. A woman. She wasn't moving. Her ki was fading. Gohan tried to give her energy. He tried to transfer his ki to heal her like he had seen Piccolo do. But his ki was too volatile. It rushed into her fragile human system and shocked her heart into cardiac arrest. She died in his arms. Gohan froze. He stared at his hands. They were covered in dust and blood. He had tried to help. He had only tried to push the bad man away. He had only tried to catch the building. But everything he did made it worse. This world was made of glass and he was a hammer. He couldn't touch anything without breaking it. Tears streamed down his face, clearing tracks in the dust. The sirens were getting closer. He heard the heavy thrum of approaching helicopters. Iron Man was coming back. Matt Murdock arrived at the edge of the ruin. He was still in his suit and tie. He heard the devastation. He heard the heartbeats fading out. He heard Gohan standing in the center of it all, his heart racing like a trapped bird. Matt dropped his cane and ran into the dust. He found Gohan kneeling. Matt put a hand on the boy's shoulder. He didn't say it was okay. It wasn't okay. People were dead. He said they had to move. Gohan shook his head. He said he was dangerous. He said he should be locked up. Matt pulled him up. He said that if he stayed, S.H.I.E.L.D. would take him and turn him into a weapon, and then more people would die. They had to run. Gohan looked at Matt. He saw the desperation in the blind man's face. He nodded. He grabbed Matt around the waist. He launched them into the sky. They moved so fast the sonic boom shattered the windows of the police cars arriving at the scene. They landed on top of the George Washington Bridge. Gohan set Matt down. The boy was trembling. The catastrophe had happened. He had crossed a line. He was no longer a victim in the eyes of the world. He was a disaster event. The news choppers were already circling the collapsed building. The chyron on the screens in Times Square read, "Unknown entity level city block. In the Avengers Tower." Stark watched the feed. His face was grim. He looked at Cap. He said the kid just killed 6 people. Cap looked at the screen. He saw the footage of the collapse. He saw the boy trying to dig them out. Cap said it was an accident. Stark slammed his fist on the table. He said it didn't matter if it was an accident. The kid was walking WWMD. If he sneezed, he could level Manhattan. They couldn't treat him like a lost child anymore. They had to neutralize the threat. Stark initiated the Buster Protocol, but not the Hulkbuster. He began inputting the data from the fight. He was designing a suit to counter kinetic energy manipulation. He was designing the Saiyan booster. Meanwhile, deep in the astral plane, Doctor Strange was consulting with entities that were old when the Earth was cooling. He was trying to find the source of the boy's power. He spoke to the living tribunal. The cosmic judge was silent, but Strange got an answer from a different source. Mephisto, the demon lord, whispered to Strange. He said the boy's soul was delicious. It was full of potential. It was full of a power that could rewrite reality. Mephisto said the boy didn't belong to their death. He belonged to a different afterlife, and that created a loophole. If the boy died here, his soul would not move on. It would become a ghost in the machine of the multiverse. It would rot the reality from the inside out. Strange realized the stakes had just gone up. They couldn't kill the boy, and they couldn't let him die. If Gohan died in the Marvel Universe, the metaphysical weight of his foreign soul might crack the walls of the afterlife. On the bridge, Gohan stood on the suspension cable. The wind howled around him. He looked at the city skyline. It looked different now. It looked hostile. He tightened his fist. He made a vow. He would not fight again. He would not use his ki. He would find a way to fix this without power, because power was the problem. He looked at Matt. He asked where they could go, where there were no people. Matt thought about it. He knew a place where the outcasts went. The Morlock tunnels, the sewers. They descended into the darkness. Gohan felt the damp air. He felt the presence of hundreds of mutants living in the squalor beneath the city. They were hiding because the world feared them. Gohan understood them now. He was a mutant here. He was a monster. As they walked into the shadows, Gohan's stomach growled again. The hunger was back, and it was getting worse. His body was starting to crave more than food. The air around him began to get cold as his cells started to pull thermal energy from the environment just to keep functioning. The water in the puddles froze as he walked by. He was becoming a black hole. And in the distance, far beyond the stars, something else had noticed the breach. The Silver Surfer paused in his flight through the cosmos. He felt the ripple. He felt the disturbance in the power cosmic. It was a signal, a beacon. His master, Galactus, had felt it too. The devourer of worlds did not eat planets for fun. He ate them for energy, and he had just sensed a morsel of energy so dense and so rich that it shone brighter than a supernova. Galactus turned his massive head. He looked toward the Milky Way. He hungered. The arrival of Gohan had not just endangered New York. It had rung the dinner bell for the apex predator of the universe. Back in the sewers, Gohan met Callisto. The leader of the Morlocks looked at the boy. She saw the quality of his clothes. She saw the sadness. She didn't ask questions. She offered him a rat on a stick. Gohan looked at it. It was disgusting, but he ate it. He ate it, bones and all. He thanked her. Callisto was surprised by his manners. She offered him a blanket. Gohan sat against the damp wall of the tunnel. He closed his eyes. He tried to sleep, but every time he closed his eyes, he saw the woman dying in his arms. He saw the dust. He realized that his father's lessons about protecting the weak were impossible here. You couldn't protect the weak when you were the one they needed protection from. The hero had tried to be a hero and had failed. The world had tried to contain him and had failed. Now the escalation would begin. The systems of the Marvel Universe were aligning against the foreign body. The antibodies were mobilizing. And Gohan was sitting in the dark, hungry, guilty, and slowly, unknowingly, freezing the Saiyans around him as his body desperately drank the heat of the earth. The temperature in the Morlock tunnels dropped by 40 degrees in an hour. It was not a winter cold. It was a vacuum cold. The damp walls of the sewer tunnels turned into sheets of grey ice. The stagnant water in the drainage pipes froze solid, cracking the iron with loud pistol-shot reports that echoed through the darkness. The mutant refugees huddled together under piles of blankets, but the cold ignored the fabric. It was a cold that leached the heat directly from their blood. In the center of the largest cavern, Gohan sat in a meditative lotus position. He was not doing this on purpose. His body had entered a critical survival mode. Denied the massive caloric intake required to sustain his Super Saiyan physiology in a universe with higher entropic resistance, his cells had switched to an emergency directive. They were harvesting ambient thermal energy from the environment to keep his core stable. He was a living heat sink. He was freezing the underground city simply by breathing. Callisto stood 10 feet away. Her lips were blue. She watched the boy with a mix of awe and terror. She realized that they could not keep him. He was not just a powerful mutant. He was a biological hazard. If he stayed for another hour, the elderly Morlocks would die of hypothermia. She was about to wake him when the motion sensors on the tunnel perimeter tripped. They didn't just trip, they melted. The reinforced blast doors at the sector entrance were blown off their hinges not by an explosion, but by a concentrated gale-force wind. Storm floated into the cavern. Her eyes were glowing white. She was manipulating the air pressure to force the cold back, but even the Omega-level Weather Witch was struggling. The air felt heavy to her. It felt like trying to move lead with a feather. Behind her walked Cyclops and Wolverine. They were wearing their tactical leather. They had come because Cerebro had detected a new mutant signature so powerful it had briefly whited out the global map. Logan popped his claws. The sound was sharp in the frozen air. He didn't like this. His nose was filled with the scent of ozone and something ancient. The kid didn't smell like a mutant. He smelled like the stars. He smelled like the thing Logan had fought on the moon once. He smelled like a Phoenix Force container, but condensed into 100 pounds of flesh. Logan signaled Scott to hold back. He stepped onto the ice. He walked toward Gohan. Gohan opened his eyes. They were dark and tired. He saw the claws. He saw the X on the belt buckles. He didn't know these people, but he knew the posture of warriors. He stood up slowly. As he stood, the temperature dropped another 10 degrees. The frost on the ceiling grew spikes. Logan spoke first. He kept his voice low. He told the kid he was killing everyone in the room. He said he needed to come with them to the mansion, where they had containment units that could feed him energy so he didn't have to eat the air. Gohan looked at the shivering Morlocks. He looked at Callisto. The guilt hit him like a physical blow. He nodded. He whispered an apology. He took a step toward Logan, but the truce was shattered before it began. A red laser dot appeared on Gohan's chest. Then 1,000 more dots appeared on the walls, the floor, and the faces of the Morlocks. The sewer ceiling exploded. Debris rained down as shield-heavy assault units rappelled into the cavern. They were wearing Stark Industries thermal dampening armor. They were led not by Fury, but by Maria Hill. She had orders to secure the asset at all costs. The catastrophe in Hell's Kitchen had shifted the boy's status from person of interest to planetary threat. The soldiers didn't ask him to surrender. They fired. They fired sonics. It was a focused frequency designed to disrupt the equilibrium of the inner ear. It was the same tech used to take down the Hulk. To Gohan, it felt like a needle being driven into his brain. He grabbed his head and screamed. The scream was a physical force. It shattered the sonic emitters. It shattered the ice on the walls. It blew the shield agents back against the stone. Cyclops reacted on instinct. He saw the soldiers firing and the boy reacting with lethal force. He opened his visor. The ruby quartz blast hit Gohan square in the chest. It was a punch from a dimension of pure force. It slammed Gohan into the tunnel wall, burying him 10 feet deep in the concrete. Wolverine roared and leaped at the soldiers, trying to stop them from engaging. Storm summoned a blizzard to blind the tactical teams. The cavern became a 3-way war zone. Morlocks ran for cover. X-Men fought S.H.I.E.L.D. And in the hole in the wall, Gohan woke up. The optic blast hadn't hurt him. It had just surprised him. But it had also broken his concentration. The lock he had on his Kai broke. The energy he had been suppressing to keep from hurting people flooded back into his system. The heatsink effect reversed instantly. The tunnel didn't just warm up. It flashed into steam. The ice turned to vapor in a microsecond. The sudden expansion of gas created a bomb. The pressure wave knocked everyone down. Gohan walked out of the hole. His hair was standing up. Golden electricity arced around his body. He was not in Super Saiyan 2. He was in Super Saiyan 1, but in this universe, the leakage was uncontrollable. The ground beneath his feet turned to lava. He looked at the chaos. He saw mutants being hurt. He saw soldiers attacking. He didn't know who was good or bad. He just wanted it to stop. He raised his hand. He didn't fire a blast. He just pushed his Kai out in a barrier, a wall of gold light meant to separate the combatants. The barrier expanded. It hit Cyclops' beam and refracted it. It hit Storm's wind and scattered it. But when it hit the shield tech, something wrong happened. The Stark armor was designed to absorb energy. The suits tried to drink the ki, but ki is not electricity. It is life. The suits overloaded. The batteries inside the armor fused. The soldiers inside screamed as their suits locked up and began to cook them. Gohan heard their pain. He dropped the barrier instantly. He flashed forward. He moved so fast he was invisible. He ripped the armor off the nearest soldier with his bare hands, tearing titanium like wet cardboard to save the man from the heat. He saved the soldier, but the soldier was terrified. The man pulled a sidearm and shot Gohan in the face at point-blank range. The bullet flattened against Gohan's forehead and fell to the floor. Gohan looked at the man with sad, teal eyes. The soldier dropped the gun and scrambled away. Gohan stood alone in the center of the steam. He was trying to save them, and they were trying to kill him. It was a loop he couldn't break. Suddenly, a new presence entered the fray. Rogue flew down from the hole in the ceiling. She saw the power radiating off the boy. She saw the threat. She made a tactical decision. She needed to neutralize him the only way she knew how. She took off her glove. She flew at him from behind. Gohan sensed her, but he hesitated. She was a woman. She wasn't attacking with a weapon. He let her get close. Rogue grabbed his bare neck. The contact was immediate and catastrophic. Rogue's power was designed to drain life force and memories. She opened the floodgates to Gohan's soul. She expected to drain a mutant. She expected a finite pool of energy. Instead, she connected to a Saiyan potential that had no ceiling. She saw the great apes. She saw the exploding planet of Namek. She felt the rage of the Super Saiyan. She felt the grief of a child soldier who had been fighting since he was 4 years old. But physically, she took in too much Kai. Her body couldn't process the density of it. Her eyes went white. Then they went gold. Her skin cracked. Gold light poured out of her mouth. She screamed, not with her voice, but with Gohan's voice. Gohan felt his energy being ripped away, but he didn't fight it. He tried to pull back to save her. He grabbed her hand to break the contact. The feedback loop created a psychic shockwave that knocked everyone in the tunnel unconscious. Wolverine, Cyclops, the S.H.I.E.L.D. agents, they all dropped. Only Gohan and Rogue were left standing, locked in a grip of transfer. Rogue was burning up. She was dying. The key was destroying her cellular structure. Gohan realized what was happening. He forced his own energy flow to reverse. He pushed back. He didn't reclaim his energy. He used his control to stabilize hers. He wrapped his Kai around her chaotic absorption and forced it down. Rogue collapsed into his arms. She was smoking. Her hair had turned white in streaks. She was unconscious but alive. Gohan held her. He looked at his hands. He was poison. Everything he touched broke. He laid her down gently next to Logan. He looked up at the hole in the ceiling. He had to leave the earth. He had to go where there was nothing to break. He flared his aura. He flew up, through the sewers, through the bedrock, and burst out into the Manhattan sky. He didn't stop. He accelerated. Mach 10, Mach 20. The friction turned the air around him into plasma. He aimed for the blackness of space. He needed to find a barren moon or an asteroid. He reached the upper atmosphere. The sky turned black. The stars appeared. He felt a moment of hope. Maybe in the vacuum would be safe. But the Marvel Universe has a quarantine system. As Gohan tried to leave the exosphere, he hit the barrier. It was a planetary defense grid established by Stark, Reed Richards, and Doctor Strange after the last Kree invasion. It was a mesh of hard light technology and eldritch runes. Gohan hit it at Mach 50. The impact rang the planet like a bell. The barrier didn't break. It flexed. It absorbed his kinetic energy and threw him back. Gohan bounced off the edge of space and plummeted back toward the Atlantic Ocean. He hit the water with the force of a nuclear warhead. The tsunami warnings triggered instantly from Maine to Florida. Deep underwater, Gohan floated in the dark. The pressure was immense, but to him, it felt like a heavy blanket. He held his breath. He could survive for a long time without air if he lowered his heart rate. He sank to the bottom of the continental shelf. He sat in the silt. He wanted to stay there. He wanted to hide in the dark forever, but he was not alone in the ocean. Neymar, the submariner, arrived within minutes. He swam with the speed of a torpedo. He held his trident. He saw the boy sitting on the ocean floor. Neymar was the king of Atlantis. He did not tolerate surface dwellers in his domain, especially ones who caused shock waves that cracked the coral reefs. Neymar didn't ask questions. He attacked. He thrust the trident at Gohan's chest. The tip of the weapon was made of Neptune steel, enchanted and indestructible. It pierced Gohan's gi but stopped at the skin. Gohan looked at Neymar. He didn't blink. He grabbed the trident. He looked at the king with eyes that were tired of fighting. Gohan shook his head. Neymar was a warrior. He respected strength. He saw that the boy was not fighting back. He saw the sadness. He lowered his weapon. He signaled for Gohan to follow him. They swam to an air pocket in an underwater trench. Neymar spoke. He told Gohan that the surface world would never accept him. They were obsessed with control. Neymar offered him an alliance. He offered him a place in Atlantis as a weapon against the surface. Gohan refused. He said he didn't want to fight anyone. Neymar laughed. He said existence was a fight. He said the boy had power, and power demanded a purpose. If he didn't choose a side would be chosen for him. Neymar was right. The water above them began to boil. The Avengers had tracked the trajectory, but they didn't come alone. They brought the heavy hitters. Thor was back, and this time, he brought the Hulk. Stark had convinced Banner that the boy was a Gamma-level threat that could crack the planet. The Hulk dropped into the ocean. He didn't need a suit. His rage allowed him to adapt to the pressure. Thor and Hulk descended toward the trench. Gohan sensed them coming. Two massive energy signatures. One felt like a storm. The other felt like a volcano. He looked at Neymar. He didn't want Atlantis to be destroyed because of him. He bowed to the king. He thanked him for the offer. Then he powered up. He pushed the water away. He created a bubble of superheated steam around himself and shot upward to intercept them. He had to take this fight away from the city, away from the ocean floor. He broke the surface of the water and hovered in the air. Thor and Hulk burst out of the water a second later. Hulk roared. It was a sound of pure challenge. He leapt at Gohan. Gohan didn't dodge. He needed to know. He needed to measure this world's strength. He caught Hulk's punch. The collision cleared the clouds for 10 miles. The shockwave flattened the waves. Gohan felt the impact in his bones. It was heavy, stronger than Frieza, stronger than the androids. This green monster was strong. Gohan slid back a few feet in the air. Hulk looked surprised. Nothing stopped the Hulk. Hulk punched again, faster. Gohan parried. He began to block and weave. He was testing Hulk's speed. It was slow. Thor swung Mjolnir. He summoned a lightning bolt the size of a skyscraper. It hit Gohan. Gohan didn't block it. He let it hit him. He wanted to see if he could absorb it. The electricity flowed over him. It stung, but it felt thin. It was magical lightning, not natural plasma. It didn't feed him, but it didn't hurt him. Gohan looked at Thor. He spoke. He asked them to stop. He said he was leaving. Stark's voice came over a loudspeaker from a high-altitude stealth bomber. He said Gohan couldn't leave. He said he was under planetary arrest. Stark activated the Saiyan Buster array. Satellites in orbit focused a beam of zero-point energy extraction on Gohan. It was the same technology Dr. Doom used to steal the power cosmic. It was designed to siphon energy from a target until they were a husk. The beam hit Gohan. He felt his Kai being pulled out. It felt like bleeding. It felt like his soul was being vacuumed. He dropped to his knees in the air. His aura flickered. The pain was excruciating. It triggered the memory of cell-absorbing Android 17, the violation, the helplessness. Gohan screamed, but this time he didn't scream for help. He screamed with rage, the old rage, the Saiyan rage. He stopped suppressing. He stopped calculating. He let the beast out. The energy drain backfired. The satellites were trying to drink an ocean through a straw. Gohan pushed more energy into the beam than it could handle. In space, 3 Stark Industries satellites exploded. The beam collapsed. Gohan looked up at the stealth bomber. He raised one hand. He fired a Masenko. It was a small one, a warning shot. The beam missed the bomber by inches, but the heat melted the wing. The plane spun out of control. Iron Man had to peel off to save the pilots. Now it was just Gohan, Thor, and Hulk, and Gohan was done holding back. He kicked Hulk. He didn't just kick him. He drove his shin into Hulk's stomach with the speed of a teleportation. Hulk folded. The air was evacuated from his lungs. Hulk was launched into the stratosphere. He went into orbit. Gohan turned to Thor. Thor threw the hammer. Gohan dodged the hammer and flew inside Thor's guard. He punched the god of thunder in the face. Thor fell. He hit the water so hard he created a crater in the ocean. Gohan hovered, panting. His eyes were teal and sharp. His hair was rigid gold. The electricity around him was blue and violent. He had won. He had defeated the Earth's mightiest heroes in under a minute, but he felt no victory. He felt a tear in the world. Above him, the sky began to bleed. The reality of the Marvel Universe was reacting to the massive discharge of foreign energy. The laws of physics were bruising. A rift opened. It wasn't a portal home. It was a tear in the dimension, similar to the Cancerverse. Tentacles of dark, oily energy began to leak out. The universe was getting an infection because Gohan had broken the skin of reality. Doctor Strange appeared in astral form. He was huge, filling the horizon. He looked down at Gohan. He spoke directly into Gohan's mind. He told the boy that his power was incompatible with this plane of existence. Every time he fought, he thinned the walls between realities. If he continued, he wouldn't just destroy the Earth, he would let the outside in. Strange told him there was no winning this. The only way to save the universe was to bind his power, to seal it. Gohan looked at the tear in the sky. He looked at the defeated heroes. He realized the truth. He was the villain, not by choice, but by nature. He powered down. The gold faded. The black hair returned. He floated there, a small boy in torn clothes, hovering over a churning ocean. He looked at the giant astral projection of the Sorcerer Supreme. He nodded. He surrendered. But as Strange began the incantation to bind him, a boom tube opened behind Gohan. A tunnel of light accompanied by the smell of ozone and sulfur. Out of the portal stepped a figure made of grey rock. Darkseid had not come, but his elite had. Kalibak stepped out, followed by Granny Goodness. They had been monitoring the energy spikes from Apokolips. They didn't care about physics. They didn't care about reality tears. They wanted the soldier. Granny Goodness smiled. She saw the boy. She saw the potential for a new fury. She saw a child who had beaten the Avengers. She fired a neural whip. It wasn't an attack. It was a capture tether. It wrapped around Gohan's waist. Before Strange could finish his spell, before Thor could rise from the water, the boom tube snapped shut. Gohan was gone. He had been taken from the frying pan of Earth into the fire of the Fourth World. The Avengers regrouping on the deck of the S.H.I.E.L.D. helicarrier. They were battered. They were confused. Stark looked at the data. He said the kid was gone. Cap asked where. Thor looked at the sky, his face pale. He knew the signature of the portal. He said the boy was not dead. He was in a place where hope went to die. He was on Apokolips. And if Darkseid broke him, if Darkseid weaponized that power, they wouldn't be fighting a child next time. They would be fighting the end of all things. The systemic clash had resulted in a total failure of containment. The anomaly had not been neutralized. It had been acquired by the worst possible player on the cosmic board. The story had moved from a disaster movie to a war movie. And Gohan, the pacifist scholar, was now in the hands of the god of tyranny. The escalation was complete. The pause button had been released. The next time Gohan returned to this reality, he would be wearing the armor of a fury, or he would be dead. There was no middle ground left. The fire pits of Apokolips did not burn with oxidation. They burned with the entropy of a dying multiverse. The smoke that rose from the endless industrial sprawl did not smell of sulfur, but of despair. There was no day or night here. There was only the red glow of the furnaces and the black shadow of the monolithic towers. In the center of the Armageddon, deep within the orphanages of Granny Goodness, Gohan sat in a cell designed to break gods. The gravity in the cell was increased to 500 times that of Earth. To a normal being, it would have reduced their skeleton to powder instantly. To Gohan, it felt like a weighted blanket. He sat cross-legged on the floor. His clothes were gone, replaced by the stark black armor of a female Fury recruit. though it hung loosely on his malnourished frame. He had not eaten in 3 cycles. He had not slept. His eyes were open and fixed on the wall. He was meditating. He was building a fortress inside his own mind to keep the screaming out. Granny Goodness watched him from the observation deck. Her face was twisted in a scowl that deepened the cracks in her ancient skin. Beside her stood Big Barda and the Furies. They were battered. They had tried to train the boy. They had tried to beat the doctrine of Darkseid into him. Lashina had used her electric whips. Stomper had crushed him with boots that could flatten tanks. Mad Harriet had slashed him with energy claws. Gohan had not fought back. He had not blocked. He had simply taken it. His Saiyan biology, fueled by the harsh environment and the constant damage, was adapting. Every time they beat him, he healed harder. His skin was becoming as dense as neutronium. But he would not fight. He would not kill. When they threw him into the pit with the hunger dogs, he simply stood there and let them bite him until they broke their teeth. Then he patted their heads. It was infuriating. It was heresy. Granny slammed her fist on the console. She told Barda that the boy was defective. He had infinite power, but no will to dominate. Barda looked at the screen. She saw something else. She saw a boy who was stronger than the environment. On Apokolips, everyone was a victim or a victimizer. Gohan was neither. He was a stone in the river. Barda felt a strange sensation in her chest. It was doubt. She had never seen anyone refuse the logic of Darkseid with such absolute silence. Desad entered the room. The torturer shuffled forward, his cowl hiding his sadistic smile. He told Granny that physical pain was useless. The boy's biology thrived on trauma. The Saiyan genetic code interpreted damage as a signal to evolve. To break him, they needed to dismantle his soul. Desad proposed the torment of the moral choice. They would force him to choose between 2 innocent lives. They would make him a killer by necessity. If they could stain his hands with the blood of the weak, his spirit would crumble, and he would belong to Darkseid. They brought Gohan to the great arena. The stands were filled with thousands of parademons chanting the name of the Dark Lord. The noise was deafening. Gohan stood in the center of the obsidian sand. He looked small and fragile against the backdrop of the towering spires. Chains made of nth metal bound his wrists, suppressing his flight but not his strength. Opposite him, a gate opened. 2 figures were pushed out. They were slaves. One was an old man from a conquered world, frail and weeping. The other was a child, a girl no older than 5, clutching a doll made of scrap metal. Granny Goodness's voice boomed over the loudspeakers. She gave the order. The boy must choose one to die. If he killed the old man, the girl would live and be trained as a fury. If he killed the girl, the old man would be given a quick death. If he refused to choose, if he refused to kill, the floor would open and drop both of them into the fire pits below. There was a timer, 10 seconds. Gohan looked at the slaves. He looked at the fire pit. He felt the heat rising. He looked up at the balcony where the elites of Apokolips watched. He saw the cruelty. It wasn't the chaotic evil of Frieza or the programmed purpose of Cell. This was systemic. It was a religion of suffering. Gohan's heart beat slowly. He remembered his father. He remembered Piccolo. He remembered the bird he had nursed back to health in the forest before the Cell Games. He knew what they wanted. They wanted him to accept the math of tyranny. They wanted him to believe that he had to trade a life for a life. 5 seconds. The floor began to tremble. The slave screamed. Gohan closed his eyes. He stopped suppressing his power. He didn't flare it outward in an explosion. He focused it inward. He located the nth metal cuffs. He applied pressure, not physical pressure, but Kai pressure. He vibrated his molecules at a frequency that matched the metal. The cuffs shattered. 0 seconds. The floor opened. Gohan moved. He did not move to kill. He moved to save. He grabbed the old man and the girl before they fell. He hovered above the pit. The heat licked at his boots. He flew up to the rim of the arena and set them down gently behind him. He stood between them and the army of Apokolips. He looked at Granny Goodness. He spoke for the first time in weeks. His voice was cracked but clear. He said he would not play their game. The silence that followed was heavy. Then the air pressure in the arena changed. A boom tube opened in the royal box. Darkseid stepped through. The Lord of Apokolips did not walk. He arrived. His presence dimmed the red sun. He looked down at the boy who dared to defy the equation. Darkseid's eyes glowed with the Omega sanction. He was not impressed by defiance. He had broken universes. He saw Gohan not as a boy, but as a variable that needed to be solved. Darkseid levitated down to the arena floor. The parademons fell to their knees. Even Granny and the Furies bowed their heads in terror. Gohan did not bow. He stood in his combat stance, the turtle school style, feet planted, hands raised. He sensed the depth of Darkseid's power. It was an abyss. It was unlike anything he had ever felt. It wasn't just high power level. It was a fundamental force of reality. Darkseid spoke. His voice sounded like grinding stones. He told Gohan that there was no choice. There was only Darkseid. He raised his hand. The Omega beams fired. The jagged red beams zigzagged through the air. They moved at the speed of thought. Gohan dodged. He moved faster than light, appearing instantly behind Darkseid. But the beams turned. They locked onto his life signature. They were homing missiles of erasure. Gohan flew up, twisting and turning through the spires of the city. The beams followed, tearing through buildings and incinerating parademons without slowing down. Gohan realized he couldn't outrun them. He had to block. He stopped in midair. He cupped his hands. He screamed the chant, Kamehameha. The blue beam erupted from his hands. It collided with the Omega beams. The impact created a singularity. The blue Kai, representing pure life force, clashed with the red Omega energy, representing anti-life. They did not explode. They wrestled. The sky turned purple. Lightning tore the clouds. Gohan poured everything he had into the blast. He felt his bones cracking under the pressure. The Omega beams were pushing back. They were eating his Kai. They were crawling up the stream of energy toward his hands. Darkseid watched with arms crossed. He nodded slightly. The boy was strong, but strength was irrelevant. The Omega effect was absolute. The red beams consumed the Kamehameha. They hit Gohan. Gohan didn't die. He didn't vanish. He screamed as the energy enveloped him. It wasn't heat. It was existence erasure. It was trying to delete him from the timeline. But Gohan's soul was stubborn. It was forged in the Dragon Ball universe, where willpower could defy death. He held onto his existence. He refused to be deleted. He thought of his mother. He thought of Trunks. He anchored himself to the concept of protecting them. The Omega energy collapsed around him. It failed to erase him. Instead, it transported him. It sent him to the Omega sanction, the trap of infinite death. Gohan woke up in a field of flowers. It was beautiful. He saw his house. He saw Goku waving at him. He ran to his father. But as he hugged him, Goku turned into ash. The sky turned red. Cell appeared. Cell killed Chi-Chi. Cell killed Goten. Gohan screamed and killed Cell. Then the world reset. He woke up again. This time he was on Namek. Frieza was there. Frieza killed Krillin. Gohan killed Frieza. But the planet exploded. He died. He woke up again and again. and again. In every life he failed. In every life, everyone he loved died because he wasn't strong enough, or because he was too strong. It was a psychological loop designed to induce total despair. It was designed to make him accept that struggle was pointless, that the only peace was submission. Time had no meaning in the sanction. Gohan lived 1,000 lifetimes of failure. His mind began to fray. He started to forget who he was. He started to believe that he was just a killer, that he was death. He sat in the ruins of a burning city in his millionth nightmare. He looked at his hands. They were covered in blood. A shadow appeared. It was Darkseid. The shadow offered him a hand. It said, "Let go. Serve me, and the pain ends." Gohan looked at the hand. It was tempting. The pain was unbearable. He reached out. But then, a small detail in the illusion flickered. In the rubble of the dream city, he saw a doll. It was the scrap metal doll the slave girl had held in the arena. It was a detail from his real memory, piercing through the fabrication. That doll represented a choice he had made to save someone even when it was impossible. Gohan pulled his hand back. He looked at the shadow. He realized the truth. This wasn't real. His failures were manufactured, but his will was real. The choice he made in the arena was real, and if he could make that choice once, he could make it again. "No," Gohan whispered. The shadow grew larger. "There is no alternative." "There is," Gohan said. He stood up. The dream city began to shake. "I am Son Gohan." He closed his eyes in the dream. He reached deep into the core of his spirit. He found the spark of anger. But it wasn't the blind rage of the Super Saiyan 2 transformation he had used against Cell. It wasn't the selfish desire for revenge. It was a righteous anger. It was an indignation against the very concept of this prison. "I will not let you decide who lives and who dies," Gohan exploded. In the real world, on the surface of Apokolips, the air above the arena cracked. A hole was punched through reality from the inside out. Gohan burst out of the Omega Sanction. He didn't just return, he ascended. He hovered above the arena. His clothes were gone, replaced by a construct of pure energy that looked like his father's gi. His hair was long, flowing down his back, shining with a platinum light. The lightning around him was not blue, it was white. He had not unlocked a new Super Saiyan form. He had forced his ki to adapt to the Omega frequency. He had metabolized the energy of a new god. He was a hybrid of two cosmologies. The pressure coming off him flattened the industrial towers for 3 miles. The fire pits were extinguished by the sheer density of his presence. Darkseid looked up. For the first time in eons, the god of tyranny uncrossed his arms. Gohan looked down. He saw the slaves. He saw the parademons. He saw the Furies. He raised his hand. He didn't attack Darkseid. He attacked the infrastructure. He fired a volley of energy blasts. They were precise. They hit the power generators. They hit the slave control centers. They hit the chain manufactories. In 10 seconds, Gohan crippled the war machine of the Armageddon. Explosions blossomed across the metallic landscape. The slaves, realizing their collars were deactivated, looked up in shock. Then they began to riot. Darkseid roared. He leapt into the sky. He punched Gohan. The impact shattered the tectonic plates of Apokolips. Magma spewed from the core. Gohan took the punch. He bled, but he didn't fall. He punched back. He drove his fist into Darkseid's stone chest. Darkseid was thrown backward, crashing through his own palace. Gohan knew he couldn't win a prolonged fight. Darkseid was immortal. Apokolips was infinite. And Gohan was burning out. The hybrid energy was consuming his life force. He had to leave. But he couldn't just leave. He had to take the war with him. He had to lead the danger away from the innocent slaves he had just freed. He focused on the energy signature of Earth. Not his Earth, the Marvel Earth. He felt the connection to the place where he had first arrived. He felt the tear he had made. Gohan cupped his hands again. He charged a Kamehameha, but he infused it with the space-time warping properties he had learned from escaping the sanction. He aimed it at the sky. Kamehameha. The beam tore a massive, ragged hole in the dimensional barrier. It was a stable bridge, a hyper-tunnel. Gohan flew into the tunnel. Darkseid rose from the rubble. He was bleeding from his lip. He wiped the blood away and looked at the glowing purple blood on his glove. He smiled. It was a terrible smile. He looked at the tunnel the boy had left open. It led directly to the universe that held the Infinity Stones. The boy had just opened the front door. "Prepare the Armada," Darkseid commanded. "We march." Gohan exited the tunnel. He slammed into the surface of the blue area of the moon in the Marvel universe. He crashed into the ruins of an ancient city. He lay there gasping. The white aura faded. His hair returned to black. He was exhausted. He looked up. The Watcher was standing there. Uatu looked down at the boy. The Watcher's face was grave. "You have survived," Uatu said. "But you have doomed us all." Gohan stood up shakily. He looked at the earth hanging in the sky. It looked peaceful, but he knew what was coming. He could feel the vibration in the tunnel he had left behind. He could hear the heavy tread of boots. "I didn't have a choice," Gohan said. "There is always a choice," Uatu replied. "And you chose war." Gohan clenched his fist. "Then I'll fight it." On Earth, the sensors in the Baxter building went red. Reed Richards looked at the data. A wormhole of impossible size had just opened near the moon, and it was stabilizing. Energy signatures were pouring through. They weren't just ships. They were gods. In the Avengers tower, Tony Stark got the alert. "Code Omega," he whispered. Whatever the kid did, he just invited the neighbors. In the Sanctum Sanctorum, Doctor Strange felt the darkness fall. The protection spells of the Vishanti withered. The smell of sulfur and ozone filled the room. Strange realized that his earlier assessment was wrong. The boy wasn't the threat. The boy was the harbinger. Back on the moon, Gohan sat in the dust. He closed his eyes. He reached out with his mind. He wasn't reaching for Goku anymore. He was reaching for anyone who could help. He projected his thoughts toward the earth. "They are coming," he broadcasted. "Get ready." The message hit the minds of every telepath on Earth. Jean Grey, Emma Frost, Professor X, Doctor Strange. They all heard the child's voice. They all felt the terror, and they all felt the resolve. The shadow of Apokolips falling over the Marvel universe. The small choice to save 2 lives in a slave pit had led to the invasion of a reality. Gohan had rejected the tyranny of the strong, but in doing so, he had brought the ultimate tyrant to a world that was not prepared for him. The crossover was no longer an accident. It was an extermination event. And Gohan, broken and evolved, stood as the only bridge between the 2 worlds. The final convergence was at hand. The war for reality had begun. The darkness that spilled out of the hypertunnel near the moon was not simply the absence of light. It was a living, breathing void that tasted of ash and old iron. The armada of Apokolips did not fly in formation. It swarmed. Thousands of biomechanical ships, shaped like snarling dogs, poured into the space between the Earth and its satellite. They moved with a hive-mind precision, their engines burning with the red fires of the degradation pits. The silence of the vacuum was replaced by a psychic scream that echoed in the minds of every sentient being in the solar system. It was a broadcast of the anti-life equation, a low-frequency hum of despair that made brave men want to lay down their weapons and weep on the surface of the blue area of the moon. Gohan stood alone against the tide. He was glowing with the white-hot intensity of his hybrid energy. To the advancing fleet, he looked like a single spark in a crushing ocean of night. Uatu the Watcher vanished. His vow prohibited him from interfering in a war of this magnitude. Gohan did not blame him. He tightened the black sash of his energy construct GI. He felt the vibrations of the approaching ships in his bones. He knew that if a single one of those ships reached the atmosphere of Earth, the planet would fall. The technological gap was too wide. Apokolips war machines were not built on physics. They were built on hate. Gohan crouched. He did not wait for them to land. He launched himself into the void. He moved at speeds that turned him into a streak of white light. He punched the lead flagship. There was no explosion. The ship simply crumpled. The kinetic force of the blow traveled through the metal hull and liquefied the crew inside. Gohan spun and fired a volley of ki blasts. Each blast was a miniature star. They tore through the swarm, vaporizing parademons by the hundreds. But for every 100 he killed, 1,000 more took their place. From the bridge of the command dreadnought, Darkseid watched the boy fight. He stood with his hands clasped behind his back. He was not angry. He was intrigued. The boy was fighting with the desperation of a creature that believed it could change the outcome. Darkseid turned to his master torturer, Darkseid. He ordered the deployment of the gravity mines. The ships released thousands of black spheres into the combat zone. They did not explode. They generated intense, localized gravity wells. Gohan felt the trap immediately. The space around him twisted. His limbs became heavy. He was pulled to a stop, pinned in the void by the weight of a collapsing star. A dozen heavily armed cruisers turned their cannons on him. They fired beams of concentrated Omega energy. Gohan screamed. He flared his Uruthawara, pushing back against the crushing gravity. The beams hit his shield, cracking the energy barrier. He was being cooked alive inside his own defense. Just as the shield was about to shatter, a beam of pure optical force cut through the dark. It was red and precise. It sliced one of the cruisers in half. Cyclops had arrived. Behind him, the space shimmered and warped as the heavy hitters of Earth teleported into the fray. The X-Men, the Avengers, the Fantastic Four, and the Inhumans materialized on the surface of the moon and in the orbital space. They were wearing space-capable suits or using magic to sustain themselves. Tony Stark, in his new God-Killer armor, led the aerial charge. He was flanked by Captain Marvel and Nova. They dove into the swarm of parademons. Thor spun Mjolnir, summoning a cosmic storm that had no clouds, only lightning that arced between the enemy ships. The Hulk, wearing a breathing mask, leaped from the moon's surface. He caught a passing dropship, ripped the hatch open, and threw the pilot into the sun. The battle for reality had begun. It was a chaotic swirl of lasers, magic, and fists. But the defenders of Earth were fighting a defensive war. They were reacting. The forces of Apokolips were endless. They didn't care about losses. They crashed their ships into the heroes just to slow them down. On the moon's surface, a boom tube opened. Kalibak stepped out, followed by the female Furies. They were not there to fight the army. They were there to secure the bridgehead. They planted a device in the lunar soil, a hellspore, a planetary terraforming bomb capable of turning the moon into a second fire pit of Apokolips. That's it. Wolverine and the Thing charged Kalibak. The son of Darkseid laughed. He swung his beta club, knocking the Thing through 3 ancient stone pillars. Wolverine slashed at Kalibak's legs, his adamantium claws sparking against the new god's dense skin. Kalibak grabbed Logan by the head and slammed him into the ground, burying him to his waist. It was a mismatch of physiology. The new gods were concepts made flesh. They were stronger, faster, and more durable than almost anything the Marvel Universe had produced. Gohan broke free from the gravity trap. He saw the Hellspore on the moon. He saw the heroes struggling. He realized that this wasn't a fight they could win by punching. They needed to close the door. He dove toward the moon. He was intercepted by Big Barda. She held her Mega Rod, a weapon capable of leveling mountains. She swung at him. Gohan caught the rod. He looked into her eyes. He saw the conflict he had sensed back in the arena. He pleaded with her. He told her that this wasn't conquest. It was suicide. If these two universes continued to grind against each other, both would break. Barda hesitated. She looked at the earth rising in the sky. She saw the beauty of it. For a split second, the indoctrination of granny goodness faltered. That second cost her. Darkseid did not tolerate hesitation. A jagged beam of Omega energy struck Barda from the sky. She fell, her armor smoking. Gohan watched her fall. Rage, cold and sharp, spiked in his chest. He looked up. Darkseid had descended. The Lord of Apokolips hovered above the battlefield, his shadow casting a pall over the craters. He ignored the Avengers. He ignored Thor. He looked only at Gohan. He spoke, his voice vibrating through the vacuum of space, heard by everyone through the telepathic link established by Professor X. He stated that the boy belonged to him. The boy was the key to the equation. His suffering had opened the door, and his submission would close it on Darkseid's terms. Gohan flew up to meet him. They collided in mid-air. The shockwave shattered the windows of the Watcher's citadel. It was a clash of absolute ideologies. Gohan, the scholar who fought for peace. Darkseid, the tyrant who fought for subjugation. Gohan punched Darkseid in the face. It felt like hitting a mountain of diamond. Darkseid didn't flinch. He grabbed Gohan's fist. He squeezed. Gohan heard his bones grinding. Darkseid pulled him close and delivered a headbutt that sent Gohan crashing down into the ocean of storms. Gohan lay in the dust. His vision blurred. His energy was critically low. The hybrid power he had stolen from the Omega Sanction was burning him out. It was a poison. He tried to stand, but his legs failed. Above him, Darkseid raised his hands. He began to channel the anti-life equation. It wasn't a beam. It was a truth. He projected the mathematical certainty of futility into the minds of the heroes. Iron Man's suit lost power as his mind reeled with the sudden desire to give up. Thor dropped his hammer, his heart filled with the memory of every failure. Captain America fell to his knees, the weight of his shield becoming unbearable. The equation attacked their will. It told them that struggle was a lie, that freedom was pain, that Darkseid was the only answer. The invasion force stopped firing. They didn't need to shoot. The defenders were defeating themselves. Gohan felt it too. He felt the crushing weight of the logic. Why fight? He had failed to save his father. He had failed to save his world. He had brought this doom to a new world. It would be so easy to just lie down, to sleep, to let the darkness win. Get up. The voice was not in his head. It was real. Gohan opened one eye. A green hand was pulling him up. It was the Hulk. But the Hulk's eyes were not filled with rage. They were filled with clarity. The Hulk was resistant to the equation, because the Hulk wanted to be left alone, not ruled. The Hulk didn't care about logic. The Hulk only knew that the big grey rock man was annoying. Beside the Hulk, Dr. Strange floated down. His astral form was tattered, but his hands were weaving a spell. He told Gohan that the equation was a frequency, a broadcast, and like any broadcast, it could be jammed. But Strange didn't have the raw power to jam it. He needed a battery. He needed a source of life energy so pure and so vast that it could drown out the signal of death. Gohan understood. He looked at the earth. He remembered the spirit bomb. He didn't know the technique perfectly. He had only seen his father do it. But the principle was the same. It was about asking. It was about trust. He nodded to Strange. He flew up, past the fighting, past the pain. He hovered between the moon and the earth. He raised his hands. He didn't speak with his voice. He spoke with his heart. He reached out to the life forms of the Marvel Earth. He didn't ask for energy to destroy. He asked for energy to hope. He connected with the mutants in Genosha, the Wakandans in the Golden City, the monks in Kamartaj, and the ordinary people in New York who were watching the sky burn. Professor X acted as the conduit. He amplified Gohan's call. He showed the world the boy who was fighting for them, a boy who wasn't even from their reality, but was willing to die for it. The response was staggering. In the Dragon Ball universe, people were hesitant. In the Marvel universe, people were used to heroes. They knew the drill. When the call went out, they answered. Energy streams of every color rose from the earth. The golden light of willpower, the blue light of science, the purple light of magic. It all flowed toward the moon. It flowed into Gohan. Darkseid saw the gathering light. For the first time, he felt concern. This was not the chaotic energy of the Omega sanction. This was something else. This was the one variable he could not calculate. The collective will of a free universe. He ordered his armada to fire on the boy. 1,000,000 cannons turned toward Gohan. Avengers, assemble. Captain America stood up. The effects of the equation were broken by the light of the spirit bomb. He raised his shield. The heroes of Earth formed a phalanx around Gohan. Thor summoned a hurricane to deflect the laser fire. Iron Man and War Machine deployed a network of drone shields. Invisible Woman created a force field that spanned miles. They bought him time. They bought him the seconds he needed. Gohan felt the energy filling him. It was overwhelming. It was too much for one body. His skin began to crack, leaking pure white light. He wasn't just holding Kai anymore. He was holding the power cosmic, the Odin force, and the gamma radiation of 1,000,000,000 souls. He looked at Darkseid. He didn't fire the ball. He absorbed it. He pulled the spirit bomb into his own body. He transformed. There was no name for this form. His hair turned white, not from age, but from the intensity of the spectrum. His eyes became galaxies. He became a living event horizon. He looked at Darkseid and pointed a finger. Go home. Gohan blurred. He didn't move through space. He folded space around him. He appeared in front of Darkseid. He punched the god of tyranny. The impact was silent. Physics had left the building. The force of the blow rippled backward through time. It shattered the Hellspore. It shattered the command ship. It launched Darkseid backward, away from the moon, away from the earth, and straight into the mouth of the hyper-tunnel he had come from. The Armada panicked. Their god had been moved. Their command structure collapsed. The heroes of Earth counterattacked, pushing the disorganized fleet back toward the rift. But the rift was unstable. The energy Gohan had used was tearing the edges of the wormhole. It was beginning to collapse, but not cleanly. It was threatening to pull the moon in with it. The gravitational shear was ripping the lunar surface apart. Reed Richards checked his scanner. He shouted over the comms. The rift needed to be sealed from the other side. If it closed naturally, the vacuum pressure would destroy the solar system. Someone had to go through. Someone had to push the energy back and lock the door. Gohan floated above the crumbling moon. He heard Reed. He knew what he had to do. He looked at his hands. The cosmic energy was fading. He was returning to his normal state. He was just a boy again, a tired, broken boy. He looked at the Avengers. He saw Iron Man, whose helmet was removed, revealing a face full of awe and pity. He saw Thor, who bowed his head in respect. He saw Captain America, who saluted. Gohan looked at the earth one last time. It was a beautiful blue marble. It reminded him of home. He wished he could have seen his mum again. He wished he could have studied to be a scholar. But the universe had other plans. He turned his back on the earth. He flared his aura one last time. It was gold. Pure, simple, Super Saiyan gold. "Tell them," Gohan whispered, though he knew only the telepaths could hear him. "Tell them I tried." He flew into the rift. He flew past the retreating ships. He flew past the flailing body of Darkseid. He flew into the chaotic tunnel of swirling colors. He reached the midpoint, the scar tissue between the realities. He planted his feet against the fabric of the Marvel Universe and his back against the fabric of the DC Universe. He pushed. He pushed with everything he had left. He pushed with the memory of Goku. He pushed with the memory of Piccolo. He pushed with the hope of the world he had just saved. The rift began to close. The light of the wormhole shrank. From the moon, the Avengers watched as the tear in the sky zipped shut. The last thing they saw was a flash of golden light, and then the stars returned. Silence fell over the blue area of the moon. The Armada was gone. The Hellspore was deactivated. The threat was over. But the cost was absolute. Tony Stark fell to his knees. He looked at the empty space where the boy had been. He ran the sensors. He scanned for a signal, a heartbeat, a key, signature, anything. "Jarvis?" Stark asked, his voice trembling. "No signal detected, sir," the AI replied. "The entity known as Son Gohan is no longer in this dimension. The dimensional barrier has been reinforced. It is scarred. It will not open again." Thor walked over to the edge of a crater. He gripped Mjolnir until his knuckles were white. "He was a warrior," Thor said softly. "He was the best of us." Captain America looked at the destruction around them. He looked at the wounded heroes. He realized that they had won, but they had been saved by a child they had tried to imprison. The shame of it weighed heavier than the victory. On the earth below, the people cheered. They saw the sky clear. They didn't know the name of the boy who had saved them. They only knew that the darkness had turned away. In the Sanctum Sanctorum, Dr. Strange sat in his meditative pose. He closed the book of Vishanti. He looked at the teacup on his table. It was cracked. He ran his finger over the rim. He knew the truth. Gohan hadn't just gone back to his own universe. The coordinates of the rift weren't set for the Dragon Ball reality. They were set for Apokolips. Gohan had sealed himself in hell to save them. Strange stood up and walked to the window. He looked at the moon. "Multiversal law is cruel," he whispered. "But perhaps he will change that too." The camera of history pulled back. It showed the earth, safe and spinning. It showed the moon, scarred but whole. It showed the universe, vast and indifferent. And somewhere, in the spaces between the stories, a legend began to form. The legend of the golden child who fell from the sky, broke the world, and then put it back together with his own hands. The story of Gohan in the Marvel Universe was over, but the consequences would echo forever. The timeline was healed, but it would never be the same. The memory of the boy who chose remained, a ghost in the machine, a standard of heroism that even the gods would struggle to match. The blue area of the moon remained a quarantine zone, long after the fleets of Apokolips were gone. It was not radioactive in the traditional sense, but the psychic residue of the conflict was so dense that it interfered with telepathic communication across the solar system. The Illuminati placed a beacon on the rim of the largest crater, a simple obelisk made of white marble. There were no words engraved on it, only a single symbol carved into the stone, the kanji for sun that Gohan had worn on his back. To the public, the event was known as the Lunar Crisis, a classified alien incursion repelled by the Avengers. To the heroes who stood on the ash, it was known as the Sacrifice. Tony Stark deleted the Saiyan Buster protocols. He scrubbed the data from every server in his possession. When Reed Richards asked him why he would destroy such valuable data on extraterrestrial physiology, Stark simply said that some weapons were too heavy for human hands. He realized that the boy's power was not a result of biology, but of spirit, and you could not engineer a suit to replicate a heart that pure. Stark retired the God-Killer armor and returned to the basics. He spent his nights looking at the stars, wondering if the signal would ever return. In the X-Mansion, Rogue underwent a fundamental change. The brief contact she had with Gohan's soul had left a permanent imprint on her psyche. She no longer dreamed of silence. She dreamed of a small house in the mountains, of a river full of fish, and of a man in an orange gi who smiled despite the weight of the world. The fragment of Gohan's memories gave her control. She found that she could touch people now without hurting them, as long as she focused on the feeling of protection she had learned from him. The boy had saved her life, and in doing so, he had given her back her humanity. Doctor Strange added a new chapter to the Book of Vishanti. He recorded the energy signature of the Super Saiyan as a cosmic constant, a force of nature equal to the phoenix or the power cosmic. He noted that the multiverse was more fragile than they believed, but also more resilient. He sensed the sealed rift often. It was a scar on the skin of reality, healed but thick. Occasionally, deep in his meditations, Strange would feel a vibration from the other side. It was faint, like the beating of a drum. It told him that the war was not over for the traveler. It told him that in the fire pits of Apokolips, the golden light had not been extinguished. On the streets of Hell's Kitchen, Matt Murdock sat in the newly rebuilt diner. He ordered 2 cheeseburgers. He ate one and left the other on the empty seat opposite him. He listened to the city. He heard the sirens, the arguments, the laughter. He remembered the heartbeat of the child who had sat there, terrified and hungry, yet carrying the power to break the world. Matt smiled. He knew that the boy was still out there, somewhere in the infinite dark, refusing to break. The story of Gohan in the Marvel Universe was finished, but the legend of the boy who chose to save a world that was not his own became a silent prayer among the guardians of the earth. They looked up at the moon not with fear, but with gratitude. The universe was vast, cold, and dangerous, but for one brief shining moment, it had been protected by a sun.